One of the things that's funny about the Halloween season, and this is something that's also cool about the Halloween season, that you don't often really get to appreciate outside of the month of October. And that is the fact that you get to experience all these different types of stories that have things like vampires, zombies, monsters, werewolves, things like that. Oh, ghosts. I can't forget ghosts. Ghosts, inspectors, ghouls, things like that in the mix. And sure, you can see stories like that any time of the year. But because October seems to be a good time where it's like packed in there, you get the whole month of, oh, and then witches, forgot about witches, black cats, um, a whole hosts of different things. These are things that are separate from normal human monsters, human evils, whatever it is. I think there's something about the fact that it's compacted into the month of October, and that's what makes it, or it can make it fun to experience, particularly when the movie is fun. Horror movies and thrillers and things can be fun to experience, but Halloween as an idea, at least how we Americans experience it, with the notion of trick-or-treating and Halloween parties, the important element of that is to kids, children's, families. And there are a lot of silly, family-friendly movies that families can watch together that don't always include murder and slashers, killing people and junk like that. And one such movie is 1995's Casper. Let's talk about this movie. If you've grown up in the 90s and you used to watch network television, what they used to call network television, as it was in the 90s, you may have come across a cartoon called Casper the Friendly Ghost. Now, Casper is much older than the 1990s, dating back to probably the 1930s or so, something like that, in comic strip form. But I remember watching the 1990s cartoon show, and that was my understanding of Casper the Friendly Ghost. I used to watch the cartoon, and Casper was cool and he was friendly. He got up to all kinds of hijinks and adventures on his way to make friends. And so when the movie came around, I might have been about 11 or so, something like that, 12 maybe. I had never seen Casper all the way through. I've seen clips over the years, and I knew about some of the little tidbits and references and stuff just sort of by being in proximity of people who had seen the movie and who had actually really enjoyed the movie. But I had never watched the film until this week. One of the things I appreciated most about the movie was, yes, it's a silly movie from the 90s. It's actually it's one of the more perfect family-friendly films to watch if people have kids under the age of, say, 10. Maybe even at 10, you could watch this, it could still be fun as a 10-year-old. Yeah, it's silly, and it's also wholesome, and touches on deeper themes, which is not something you would have come across in the cartoon. Certainly not that I remember, but I had fun with this movie. I did roll my eyes a couple times. Some of the but again, this is from someone who effectively didn't grow up with the movie because I didn't watch it as a kid. But it definitely did speak to my sensibilities, like my kid sensibilities. This movie came out in 1995, which was also the year the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie came out. And so obviously that's where my head was at. I was all about Power Rangers. So Casper was there. I knew Casper was there, and I knew Christina Ricci was around the mix because I liked Christina Ricci as a kid, and so I remember from the Addams Family movies because I loved those movies. But it stopped at Addams Family Values, and I didn't follow Christina Ricci's journey through to Casper, which would have been the next movie following Addams Family Values that would have come out a couple years after that. But yeah, so Power Rangers was where I was living. Having seen it, it was a good watch, and I found myself surprisingly moved by several elements of the movie. So, and I loved there's great cameos in this movie. Like this is the movie came out during a time where you had cameos that were honest to goodness cameos. Nobody knew anything was going to be jumping off in the movie. Now I knew about one of the cameos. At least going in, I was aware over the years because I was a fan of Ghostbusters already. Most of those kids, most '90s kids, most '90s boys, I'll say, that I knew were huge fans of Ghostbusters. So if you're a Ghostbusters fan, there was something in this for you to going in to watch Casper. However small it was, it's one of those. It just makes you happy to see. So I was aware of that. I think my brother had seen it at school. This is back when you could watch movies in classes. I don't know how many schools do that these days, in terms of having kids pick the movies to bring. But we went to school during a time where you could do that. And I think one of my brother's classes, someone had picked Casper. Again, I was already in middle school at this point, I think. And my brother might have still been, he was like finishing elementary school before he'd gone to middle school. And he had mentioned to me about the cameo. So I think it was the first time, one of the cameos anyway, that I had been aware of it. So I knew about it. But again, because I hadn't seen the movie, it was like, whatever to me. Like, okay, cool, whatever, And since then, though, I had seen the cameo on YouTube somewhere at least once. But it was something to watch the movie in its entirety and then experience it, in the context of the movie. That's kind of cool. That's cool. It bothers me a little bit as a Ghostbusters fan. Like you want them to go in there and do something, but also this is this story. The Ghostbusters don't really feature prominently. The Ghostbusters have their juice. This is the Casper juice. You gotta be okay with that. So I had to stay my emotions to be all right, cool, whatever. I'm cool with it. Ultimately, I'm with it. And that is a springboard to these other cameo appearances that are just great. They're just fun to see. Again, they're not around long. It's just little blips, little moments, but it adds to the fun and the oddly the magic of this movie too. And they're great little surprises. I wish movies did this more often. The closest thing I can think of now, the last two Thor movies, Ragnarok and Love and Thunder, does lean into the idea of cameos, and not necessarily the cameos that we expect from like the MCU cameos, like you have another hero popping up in someone else's stuff, but random people who random in the sense that they're not supposed to be in this. You would never expect them to be in this movie, in the movie that you're watching, and that's fun. It's fun when that comes up. I think the only other similar cameo I think I can think of that's like that is probably Interstellar. For all intents and purposes, there is a reveal in that movie, and that is a cameo appearance. It's slightly longer than most, but I would count that as a cameo. And there are movies that do something like that, but the way it's the art of a cameo is used in this Casper film, it's pretty perfect. The other thing that I had been aware of about this movie was the notion of Casper's death. As a kid, again, no concept of what that is for the character, and even in his origins or whatever. If I recall, Casper didn't really have an origin story like that. He was always a ghost, and that was it. He was born like that. He was a ghost already. But there's something about it that makes logical sense around if you're making a movie. The nature of a movie, a live action movie, it's already, there's something about it that's decidedly more real than what you would see in an animated picture. Because it has real humans in it doing stuff, there is a form of reality to it. This is like, I'd said something similar. I reviewed a while back the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, the first one from 1990. The idea that you now have them in real life, their skin and their mouths are moving and they're interacting with humans in a way that you can almost touch, not in the Who Framed Roger Rabbit way, although that's great too. This is different because they're physically taking up space. There's a realism there that helps you as a kid and just as a viewer buy more into that. You buy into it more. And I think when you come to Casper, the idea that you have ghosts, there's something also, it's quite, the idea, there's something simple about it. Like the fact that ghosts, specters, are that because they were once human. This is something that we all understand. There's a basic idea about what a ghost is. Ghosts were once human people, and then they die and they become ghosts, whatever it is. This is what, at least that's how you understand it as a kid. So the notion of a movie about Casper that gives him a backstory that, oh, he was once alive at one point. This is it adds a level of depth for this iteration of the character that is that feels like it has some weight. And I can remember learning about that as a kid and feeling like, oh shoot, I like immediately feeling a sadness there. And it was something that I didn't want to experience because I liked the idea of happy-go-lucky, bouncy, friendly Casper not having to contend with the notion of mortality. He always seemed like this friendly kid who just wanted to just have fun all the time. And as a kid myself at the time, that was where I wanted my Casper to live. But having now seen the movie and seen it in its full context, it was the one part of the movie that going in, I was apprehensive about. I was a little nervous about because I knew at some point the movie was going to address Casper's death. And what I love about it when it does finally come up is that they don't show any flashbacks. There's no flashbacks. You get pockets of an explanation that gives you the story of what he was experiencing before his death. You don't get like strict details like, oh, I was hit by a car. Oh, I fell down a, garbage compactor thing and I got crushed or whatever it is. It's not like that. In fact, you don't really get anything other than he was sick. And so obviously, the suggestion is that he died of pneumonia or something else. But I love that you don't really get a specific reason or cause for his death. You just know he got sick and that was it. And there's something really, I think it's kind of genius because it lends itself to this idea that it ultimately doesn't matter how. Like, we also don't know how Kathleen's mom dies. The assumption is maybe cancer, maybe something that doesn't require, again, she didn't get hit by a car. She didn't fall out of a building, whatever. It's like she's just gone. And we understand that. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you go. It's just that it's happening. Like, you're going to go. And this is what we're grappling with. And I think that's the as fun and silly as this movie is, the punch it packs is the ways in which it ruminates on death. It doesn't spend a ton of time talking about death or, examining death or even grief. Although those things are there. It is about grief. It is about death. And it also is, about embracing the fun of a friendly ghost and other ghosts who are less friendly, but are just, they're characters. They have personality, and engaging in a conversation with that is it's lively. It makes the movie that much more alive because it's not one note. It hits the audience on different levels. Of, yeah, it's silly. Yeah, it has some elements of corniness. And it also deals with grief. And it also deals with death. And it also deals with these other things that about, teen, angst a little bit. But along the lines of the teen angst piece, there's something very chaste about it too, very wholesome about these characters who just want ultimately to have a friend. I like that a lot about the movie. I like that it doesn't lean into the more spicier elements of like teenage, the like the romantical elements of like proto sensuality, whatever it is, which you might catch in other movies that have teenagers about their age, 14 years old or so, 14, 15 years old. This movie is more wholesome. It leans more wholesome than it does the other way. And that's great. Speaking of that, moving to the performances here, Christina Ricci is great as always. The one thing I did notice in this movie, to me, her performance in this movie felt slightly inconsistent at certain points. I can't tell you why that is, but there was just, a couple parts that felt like, no. I mean, when you compare it to Wednesday Addams from the Addams Family movies, this movie, yeah, she's playing a different character, but there's something about it that doesn't feel like it doesn't feel tight enough. It doesn't feel as tight as she does at Wednesday. And you look at particularly Addams Family Values, where Wednesday and Pugsley feature more prominently in that movie than they do in the 1993 original or the 1991 original film. You get to see Christina Ricci flex a lot more in Addams Family Values, and you look at that and compare it against Casper, and again she's good as always. There are just pockets there that feel to me like it doesn't live up to other areas of the film in the same movie. So that's probably really the only knock that I might put on the film. Aside from that, it's good fun. I think she's good. Bill Pullman is good. He's a good dad in this movie, and he plays a good dad, and he leans into the more humorous aspects of this movie. Even just the very notion of a therapist for ghosts on paper sounds ridiculous, but Bill Pullman is committed to that, and he sells it, and it works for the most part. He's really giving himself to the performance. And it's fun. It's fun to see. Kathy Moriarty and Eric Idle are the film's human antagonists. And for the most part, they're passable. They occupy the same space as most antagonists from early 90s, mid 90s movies, and they're passable as the opposition to the heroes in this movie, and they provide great comic relief. They add to the levity, and they're just like deliciously bad. Like they're reveling in the fun, but there's something about them that makes them less. They're not as charming as, say, Harry and Marv from Home Alone, the Home Alone movies. But hey, that's what we have. That's what we have. And I think for this movie, it works. It's fine. It works. You don't really need, because you already have Stinky, Fatso, and Stretch, so that's fine. That's just enough. You have enough antagonists. If nothing else, this movie is entertaining. So if you watch it, if you haven't seen it in a while, and you do watch it, just know, remember that it'll entertain you. And I say that knowing that this movie is a seminal work for a lot of people's childhood. And having seen it myself, I can understand why. As a child of the 90s, I can understand it. Particularly, this is something else that, this is another conversation piece, or Devon Sawa, pardon my pronunciation. There's a lot of talk about 90s sweethearts. A lot of the ladies who were people's crushes. But Devon Sawa is a guy who I hadn't heard too much about, even from the girls in my classes. There were a few that mentioned him, but it didn't really click yet, because at that time, most people in my circle talked about JTT. That was the main one. Jonathan Taylor Thomas was like the main one. He was like and that was it. No, there were more, but Jonathan Taylor Thomas was like the key dude in 1995. That was Home Improvement was still on the air, and this is post Lion King. JTT who we know voiced Simba in Lion King. So he was like the main male heartthrob. You also had Joey Lawrence was another. He was huge. So just like Devon Sawa wasn't in the conversation really in a lot of people in my circles, but having seen the movie now, I could look. He was a handsome young man. He was very strapping. So I understand it. And I say that because this ties into what I was talking about this movie being a seminal childhood piece, seminal work for people's childhood. And Devin likely he doesn't have a lot of time in this movie, but there's likely, I'm sure he was a huge piece of that for a lot of young girls and some boys, I'm sure. But yeah, this is an entertaining movie. And if you haven't seen it in a while, you might consider giving it a watch. But that's going to do it for this review. If you've stuck around to the end of this video, thank you very much for your time and for hanging out with me talking about Casper and stuff like that. So I'm curious. Now, I know there are a few direct-to-DVD, direct-to-video releases following this Casper film. And I'm curious. I may at least watch Casper Meets Wendy, because Wendy is another original character from the Harvey Comics situation, and it makes me curious about wanting to see what that's about. But in the meantime, I gotta get out of here. So stay tuned for the next reviews coming up. In the meantime, take it easy, and I'll see you guys in the next one.